Devaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, continue in the Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 11, this meditation on the form of the Lord. So, Vibhushitam, well decorated, Mekalaya, with an ornamental wreath about the waist, Anguliyakar, finger rings, with finger rings, Mahadhanai, a great treasure that was very valuable, Nupura, ringing leglets, Kankana Adivi, by bangles, etc., Snigda, slick, Amala, spotless, Akunchita, curling, Akunchita, curling, Nila, bluish, Kuntalai, hair, Virochamana, very pleasing, Anana, face, Hasa, smile, Peshalam, beautiful. Oh, 2:11. So we'll chant that together. Vibhushitam me kalayanguliyakar. Vibhushitam me kalayanguliyakar. Mahadhanarnu parakankanadivi. Snigdhamala kunchita nila kuntalar. Virochamananana. Yeah, that's what it is. Hasapeshalam. Virochamananana. Hasapeshalam. Vibhushitam me kalayanguliyakar. Vibhushitam me kalayanguliyakar. Mahadhanarnu parakankanadivi. Mahadhanarnu parakankanadivi. Snigdhamala kunchita nila kuntalar. Kunchita nila kuntalar. Snigdhamala kunchita nila kuntalar. Mala kunchita nila kuntalar. Virochamananana hasa pechalam. Vibhushitam me kalayani Vibhushitam me kalayanguliyakar. Vibhushitam me kalayanguliyakar. Mahadhanayanu pura kanakanadivi. Mahadhanayanu pura kankanadivi. Snigdhamala kunchita nila kuntalar. Snigdhamala kunchita nila kuntalar. Virochamanana hasapeshalam. Virochamanana hasapeshalam. So, Vibhushita means well decorated, mekalaya, with an ornamental wreath about the waist. So we did that. Actually, I did that. So, translation. He is well decorated with an ornamental wreath about his waist and rings studded with valuable jewels on his fingers. His leglets, his bangles, his oiled hair curling with a bluish tint, and his beautiful smiling face are all very pleasing. Purport by Prabhupada, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most beautiful person amongst all others. And Srila Sukadeva Goswami describes every part of his transcendental beauty, one after another, in order to teach the impersonalists that the personality of Godhead is not an imagination by the devotee for facility of worship, but he is the Supreme Person in fact and figure. The impersonal feature of the Absolute Truth is but his radiation, as the sun rays are but radiation from the sun. So are we? So um, this verse, uh, I think, brings up a very interesting philosophical topic, and that is these descriptions: an ornamental wreath about the waist, finger rings of great value, ringing leglets, bangles, slick curling hair. Uh, Clearly, I mean, this kind of not Krishna. We're not talking about Krishna and his own personal beauty, but to be adorned in this way, it is attractive to certain cultures, and other cultures it would be considered not attractive. So, in other words, it's not. So, does that mean that people, let's say, in cultures where the idea of a, let's say, of a man having slick hair, putting, some type of oil on his hair, or having lots of rings, and what was that word? Leglets, and so on. So philosophically, how should that be understood? A description, because in some cultures we know, men actually dress that way, so that would be considered attractive. And in other cultures, it would be considered very unattractive. And so, is it that in the cultures that consider that attractive, they're simply more advanced, they're in a higher state of consciousness, uh, or is there something else going on here? Anyone want to comment on this?
Well, this is the spiritual standard.
True. Okay, this is a spiritual standard. Also, as Prabhupada says, that that it's not like in the material world, and so this world is a perverted reflection. So something which in this world can be not attractive can be very attractive on the spiritual plane. Of course, Krishna himself is always very attractive. Even the demons found Krishna very attractive. The Brahma Samhita says that, although it's interesting because, of course, this is a meditation. I'll play the devil's advocate and then invite some of you to put a stake in the heart of the devil. So one can say that, I mean, of course, on the one hand, the Bhagavatam is written for all people at all times. On the other hand, it appeared in and a particular part of the world where exactly this type of, let's say, ornament or this type of dress was considered attractive for men. It also says in the Brahma Samhita that Krishna reciprocates, that Krishna appears in a form which is pleasing to different devotees. So if someone argues that this is a description of Krishna and it's not false, it's not a false description, but also is meant to attract a certain group of people. Of course, Krishna, being omniscient, knows that we would also be reading the Bhagavatam. And so you could say, why would a Shastra be written only for, or be manifested, be revealed only for a certain group of people at a certain time? There are, and I'll make one more point and then leave it open to refutation. We know there are cases, for example, in the Hari Bhakti Vilas by Sanatana Goswami, where Prabhupada said it was written for a certain group of people, namely Indian grihastas around 500 years ago. And that's actually who the book was intended for. It's not that everything there is irrelevant, but in general, all, this very long list of rules and technical things was meant. Prabhupada said for Indian grihastas 500 years ago. So three conditions. So, and we know that in the Bhagavatam itself, we know that in the Bhagavatam itself, there are descriptions of yoga processes or meditations that we don't do nowadays. So then the question would be, are these statements, because we know that, for example, when Prabhupada was asked, what does Krishna dress like in the spiritual world? Uh, Prabhupada said very simply that he doesn't wear many clothes, and also indicated not so many jewels and ornaments. And so, to what extent, just like we read about Vishnu holding different symbols, and there's all these different Vishnu forms with different arrangements of the symbols, the four symbols. And um, so obviously, if Krishna was holding these symbols all the time, even as Narayan, he wouldn't be able to do anything. Because if you're walking around just holding things in your hands, how could you do anything else? Like, how could you embrace the goddess of fortune? How could you just drink a cup of water if your hands are full of symbols? And so you could, and also one last thing, then I'll turn over. I have a feeling that, anyway, see what what arguments there are. But this comes right after the description of the universal form. Now, of course, obviously, Vishnu is really Vishnu. The universal form is not merely a meditation, and yet the universal form is something which was tailored for meditation for a particular purpose. So, granting that ontologically Narayan is really Narayan, it's not just a meditation, to what extent is this a meditation? Because the Bhagavatam is giving this as, and remember, there are no pastimes with this Narayan form. It's describing these four arms. This is not a form of the Lord with whom you engage in activities. It is given simply as an object of meditation. So, to what extent could that object of meditation be presented to bring about a certain effect, even though Narayan, of course, is a real form of the Lord? So, I'll stop there. Any points?
Um,
How do we do this? Because we're recording and they can't hear your
I,
question.
I think they can. This sounds pretty good. Um, is it even appropriate to compare our own cultural standards and what would be appropriate or not to a spiritual description?
Is it appropriate? Well, according to what Prabhupada says, uh, according to what Prabhupada has taught us, and I think common sense, there is, Prabhupada always emphasized simple life. So, um, and Prabhupada said that Krishna dresses simply in the spiritual world, in Krishna Loka. So if one is dressed simply in clothes that have no other purpose than to just cover the body, and they're comfortable and clean, and so on and so forth, to what extent is that a highly subjective cultural standard? It seems that the more one sort of elaborates or has all kinds of more, how would you put, opulent or decorative things, I think the more you do that, the more it becomes a specific cultural standard. So, and also, I didn't say, like, why isn't Krishna wearing a cotton T-shirt and jogging pants? I mean, so it's not that I'm saying that. I think what we're really comparing is, you could say, simplicity. And I mean, but you're right. We are conditioned in a certain way. We are conditioned, for example, to think it's strange to see a man wearing bangles. It looks a little effeminate to us. Or a man wearing ankle. And of course, this is Krishna who's very young, and he's very young. And in India, you could say it comes from the spiritual world, or it just comes from India, where they really decorate their children. And so, even if you take it as simplicity versus something very elaborate. And finally, my point is this a meditation form? Because what's interesting in the Bhagavatam, if you think about it, there are hardly any pastimes of Vishnu. Like with Krishna, you have all this Krishna Lila. The whole 10th canto is Krishna Lila. And in other parts of the Bhagavatam, there's constant reference to Krishna Lila. So is there Narayana Lila even in the Bhagavatam? Usually the appearance of Vishnu or Narayan is simply that someone is in trouble, like Gajendra, or someone offers prayers, like Dhruva or Narada, And then Narayan appears. It's an epiphany where Narayan appears in this magnificent godly form. Just as, for example, in the prison house of Kamsa, Narayan, Krishna first appeared as Narayan to sort of establish, hey, everybody, I'm God. Okay, you got that? So then he became Krishna. So do we have Narayana Leela in the Bhagavatam? Can anyone think of a case? As opposed to just appearing, accepting prayers, giving boons, teaching, and then vanishing.
Is it because his purpose is not to display Leela?
Um,
Sort of a different.
well, if we take his purpose to be what he actually does, because one of Krishna's features of his omnipotence is that whatever his purpose is, he accomplishes it. And so if you look at what Narayan actually does in the Bhagavatam, we would have to take that as his purpose because he's omnipotent. And so again, it's hard to think of Narayana Leela. Of course, the Bhagavatam is specifically about Krishna also. But even if I don't know, I'm not an expert in the Vishnu Purana or those other Puranas, but it seems that in the Gaudiya tradition, the only thing that even kind of comes close to a Narayan Leela is when the gopis are searching for Krishna and they run into Narayan who's sitting there, which is kind of interesting. And I always thought that's amazing because, the greatest yogis are trying to see Narayan for many lifetimes and the gopis just ask for directions. It's not like, that's Narayan. It's just, do you know which way Krishna went? And so, and it seems like as close as we come in the entire Bhagavatam to Narayan. And consider how Narayan appears in the Bhagavad Gita, not as a speaker, not as a teacher, but just Arjun just wants to see it. Hey, Krishna, since it's kind of epiphany time here, could I see the four-handed form? And so it's just shown to him as as a manifestation of God, but again, there's no pastime.
Well, it seems that Narayan is uh, Krishna as doing his God thing,
Yes, definitely.
so that's kind of Krishna at work, while Leela is Krishna at play, doing the things that he likes to do. But Narayan is kind of just, you know, handling the affairs of creation and
Yes.
all that technical kind of down to business and stuff.
Yeah, I would say that Narayan is God at the office and then Krishna is God at home. Although there are, worlds where people want to worship Narayan or Rama or whatever. So yes, that's very true. But then again, so building on what you said, that Narayan is, as we know, he's, Karanarnava Shahi. He lies down in the causal ocean, and then the universes come out, and then the next stage is Garbhodaka, or what are they saying? It's Garbhodaka. Anyway, Garbhodaka Shahi Vishnu, and then there's Kshirodaka Shahi. And as you said, performing the act of creation and then entering, pervading this world and sustaining it really. So yeah, exactly. So those are all pastimes related to conditioned souls. Of course, we hear about the many Vishnu lokas, and some devotees want to go there. Some devotees, the devotees in Narayan want to go there, but at least in our tradition, our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, and even you could say in the Puranas, of course, again, I can't speak for the other Puranas, just the Bhagavad Purana, but um, so here we have Narayan as an object of meditation. But when it comes to personal relationship, pastimes, actually living with someone, being with someone, interacting with someone with eternal pastimes, then it's Krishna. And if you look at Lord Chaitanya, who is, of course, Krishna's appearance in this age, it's very interesting that he arranged his pastime that he would be a sannyasi for, say roughly half of his time in this world, over half the time in this world, in which, I mean, the last thing in the world he would wear is an ornament. In fact, Chaitanya did not accept that Sanatana Goswami, once he surrendered, even had a sort of a fancy chadar. And so in this age, we worship Chaitanya, Gauranga, and it was very simple. It was very, very simple. It's interesting because, like, if you look at these Panchatattva pictures, even, uh, the Panchatattva are dressed simply, and they don't have crowns and bangles, and I don't know, they may have painted Lord Chaitanya with some bangle or something, but Lord Chaitanya. So anyway, so do you want to comment or pursue your point?
No, I think it makes sense.
Any other comment, Brahmatirtha?
It's a very, yeah, I mean, we were talking interestingly to a student yesterday, so I think I wonder what she would say about this Narayan Leela issue.
Well, if you look at, as she said yesterday, the Vasudha, that in South India, often Narayan's lying down, he's sort of in repose,
Yeah,
and Lakshmi's there. But it's not that Narayan steals butter or, lifts a hill or, and you can say it's interesting because it's often said that when Krishna's at Kurukshetra, it's sort of, channeling his Narayan Leela, but still he appeared as Krishna. And so anyway,
Well, similar to, say, most of the biblical and the Old Testament stories that I'm aware of, it's kind of just there's some like vague thing, with God, but it's not like there's no real descriptions, and there's no, there's stuff that happens, but it's not like stories and pastimes. It's kind of God doing the big important stuff.
yeah, it's definitely God is majestic. God is Melech Haolam, which in Hebrew means king of the world. So that's a common image. For example, the Old Testament God as a supreme king, just ruling, governing, blessing, and punishing. So, no other points there? So we'll stop there for now then. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.